Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Psychology for Growth. My name is Dr. Richard Amaral. I'm a psychologist here in Canada. And today I'm really looking forward to interviewing Andre Gear. Andre is a teacher at Dawson College in Quebec, Canada. He has a bachelor's of science specializing in exercise science, and he's a huge promoter of physical activity and mental health. And today we're going to talk a lot about that, get into a little more depth discussion. Andre, welcome. Thank you for doing this.
For having me.
My pleasure. So I guess first off, Andre, is um, a lot of times, around the new year, uh, a lot of people, all of us really value physical health, physical activity. But I find it so hard. I hear from a lot of people, a lot of my clients, it can be very difficult to establish like a routine, to establish a habit of physical activity. So I thought perhaps we can just start by talking about that. Like, what are some of the strategies or some of the tips or maybe some principles you give to some of your students, some of your clients, and how they can better establish a habit for physical activity?
Um, that's a big question, right? And so it all matters where we're starting. Like you said, New Year's is always the time that people want to start exercising. But if we break it down, establishing a habit really comes down to one is setting a clear objective in the beginning. But even there, we get wishy washy right away. There's too much pressure around it. So if we have someone
Mm,
who's not exercising at all, we want to make it really easy to start moving our body. And so the overarching goal that I usually have people looking at is what can you adhere to? So the goal or the objective, if we're going from a place of zero, is adherence. And so adherence, what I mean by that is essentially, can you get yourself walking for 10 minutes a day outside? And
mm,
start really at the fundamental level and then working your way up. Because the adherence and consistency is what allows you to feel better in your body. If I just have you doing one workout for 1 hour a week, you don't actually feel the benefit that much. And in fact, it's hard. Every week you go and you work out once a week and you're tired and you don't feel replenished. But if you start in small bits and over time, um, it will slowly improve.
mm. I like that. I like that consistency. In psychology, when I'm talking about some clients who perhaps are dealing with something like depression, the term I'll think of is like behavioral activation. We just want to like activate that behavior. And I like what you identified as just like keeping it small. Because at the end of the day, it's the consistency, right? It's the regular activity. And then escalate from there. Um, so in terms of like you talked about starting with, let's say, 10 minutes, but the recent guidelines for the Canadian guidelines for physical activity recommended that a person do like 120 to 150 minutes of like moderate intensity. So, 120, 150 minutes, 2.5 hours, 2 hours, close to 3 hours, and spread over a week. But it still seems like it can be a lot. And for a lot of people with their busy lives, it's just difficult to do. I just want to know what your thoughts are on that in terms of, guidelines and recommendations. And what can you say to some of the parents who might be losing some hope that they can fulfill some of those guidelines? Yeah.
So yeah, pertaining to the physical activity requirements or the standardization of physical activity, like people aren't driven by facts. And
Mm,
this is all comes from a place of data, and we know that exercising is good for you. So it's very hard to disagree with it. But the thing is like if we're trying to get someone to start moving, telling them how much to do it, I've personally found is not the best way to do it. And having just someone start moving for their body is seems to be the easiest way. When we add pressure to a situation, that usually doesn't incentivize someone to start doing it. And most people who don't have exercise in their life right now, it's their in their own in their the way they view themselves is or their bodies in a negative balance. And what we're
Mm,
trying to do is give them to have some relationship in a positive context with their body. And having someone go from nothing to a 10-minute walk a day is a huge leap. And so taking standardizations and applying them is a great thing. It just depends where you are on the path of physical activity.
I like that. I like this last point you made about where you are on the path, because yeah, we often forget that development, self-improvement, self-growth, it is a journey, right? It's a path. And let's not focus so much on the end result, or the sorry, not so much the end result, but let's not focus so much on the destination, 150 minutes, but let's just get it started. Let's just start building a habit. I really like that. And it's a pathway that we take. You also said, Andre, that one of the best things we can do for a body, apart from physical activity, is sleep. Well, that's also one of the subcategories of physical health, the letter P. So, uh, what are some tips, some strategies you have, or some thoughts you have regarding sleep, and the importance of that for our lives?
Well, it's always interesting when we talk about sleep and physical activity because one of the best things you can do for your sleep is physical activity, right? So a lot
Mm,
of people actually go to bed and say if you're having trouble sleeping, often the first prescription will be did you move today? You know, your body has some extra energy. Apart from physical activity, um, things that I found have worked and some of the research backs up is setting up a routine. And what I mean by that is something I've used before is setting an alarm to go to bed
mm,
instead of waking up because we get caught in the black hole of the internet or we're scrolling. And so having a time that we've predetermined of when we're going to cut off and go to sleep is one thing. And so that's establishing a routine. The next thing is uh, cutting your caffeine intake. Some people like to have a coffee, say 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And yeah, you might be able to fall asleep, but it is affecting the quality of your sleep. You're not getting as
mm.
many REM cycles in. So that's another thing, as well as staying away from the nightcap, right? The alcohol right before you go to sleep. Um, and then getting natural sunlight in your eyes as soon as you wake up, which helps set the circadian rhythm of the body. But these are all things that you can do to help the sleep cycle. But one of the main things is just to allow yourself to get that 7 or 8 hours of sleep in your life. So for a lot of people in the clientele that I used to work with, very corporate, they were sleeping maybe 5 6 hours a night, and that can be very difficult as well if you're a young mother. You're not getting any sleep. So it's trying to making sleep a priority, and that is something that's not usually done in our society.
You talked about caffeine, and that makes me think too about this diet in general. And I was wondering if perhaps you can talk about specifically like diet and impact on mental health. Impact on things like anxiety, things like stress. What have you found to be some important messages that talks about the relationship between diet and health?
So there's a lot of ways we could approach that question, in my opinion. And one of the ways is, people use eating as a vice. If they're feeling, again, this is more your realm of the insecure, shame, doubt, whatever
Mm,
they're eating their feelings essentially.
yeah.
And that now trickles into the motivation of actually moving for physical activity, again, which impacts your sleep. So when you dial in on nutrition, particularly I use people to help, diet plans and you're usually trying to shave off weight. Um, but this the structure that I have for the person who's just starting to approach a diet, and when I say diet, I mean like what you eat, is not to change anything what you're eating, but to start adding more healthy food.
Mm,
And the reason for that is you don't want to start something new and feel limited. And when we feel limited, you're less likely to adhere to it. It's not fun, right? If I can't have
yeah.
my ice cream, I'm not going to do this. I'm already suffering. So if you just start adding more vegetables, vegetables and hummus, leafy greens, just add the simple things first. And then what you'll realize is when you're eating those things is you tend to feel better. I often encourage my clients to notice how they feel after they eat something. And when they start to eat that unhealthy snack or you watch that movie and you're eating that whole bag of chips, when you get off the couch, you don't feel very good in your body. And just having a better understanding of how you feel in your body when you're eating is one approach that I like to have first with my clients. And it seems to have some success.
And I think that piece around, what you just said there, that I really like about just paying attention to your body. Um, you know, that's one of the habits, or one of the things I'm trying to do more of myself is, after a meal, I'm ready for seconds, I'm ready for thirds, I'm ready for fourths, right? But I realize, like, if I just wait for about 20 minutes and then see how I feel, that also has that has a huge impact as to the quantity of food that I consume, because I find that if I just wait a little bit more, um, I won't have such an appetite.
Absolutely. And there's little tricks to that, like having you, drink a couple glasses of water before you start eating to kind of fill the stomach a bit. But ultimately, it's what you just said about mindful eating. Are you actually paying attention? Are you just
Mm,
scarfing down food, watching TV, and then you go and you eat it just because it's out of habit, right? And those are the biggest things to change. And again, James Clear from Atomic Habits talks about 1% better every day. And so if you're focusing on eating, can you just slightly change your eating habit? Just a little bit. Can you maybe make a rule where it's like after dinner, I'm not having any more food,
mm,
right? If you're the snacker who's at 10 p.m. right before they go to bed, they're eating too much or they just have those extra calories that they don't need. Can you just stay away from that? And I would say like the first 3 days, try to do 3 days a week, and then the next week
mm,
4 days a week, and then progressively over time, you start to see and feel the change. This is the biggest takeaway that I try and sell my clients on is that you have to give it time. You have the same with the exercise, same with the sleep, and same with the eating is that this take 2 months of time and consistency where then you will feel one day you just like, wow, I feel better. I
yeah.
feel better than where I was.
That's another good message there. It's about the being patient here, right? Being patient with ourselves, and realizing that it takes time. Any journey, any goal we set, it takes a little time. And I would also add to that something I've learned from my own experience and things I've read in the around change and habits is that if you slip off the wagon, right? If you eat that piece of chocolate cake when you promised yourself you weren't going to, or go back to the physical activity piece, if you didn't do any physical movement for, let's say, 3 days in a row and you promised yourself you were going to do at least one, um, just get back on the cycle, right? Like, it takes time. We
Right.
want to establish the habit and just get back on the cycle and try again.
Yeah, and the self-talk, the negative self-talk just doesn't serve you at all, especially around the physical realm. Again, a lot of people that I have resistance to moving because of the negative self-talk. And
Mm,
negative self-talk, what I mean by that is that they think even if they do a small action of exercise, it's not worth it because it doesn't get a result. It
right.
becomes obsolete. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that you can have is that something is drastically better than nothing.
That's
If
right.
you've been sitting at home and doing remote work and haven't gone outside for the day, just getting some sunlight and walking around the block is just so good for you and your mental health and your physical body. And that's where we should start. We should just start with that. And it's obviously different if you're already exercising, then we got to move up the ladder, so to speak. But everyone's at a different starting point. And when we get into physical performance, that's a whole other conversation.
So it's essentially just start with the easiest thing for you to do, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. 15 minutes, but take it slowly and then slowly increase, slowly progress. And the same principle applies to the diet, right? Like just start with eating, I don't know, maybe eating a piece of celery, eating a piece of cucumber, adding that to your day, and then slowly increase it. And water, I was going to ask you about water. I find that that has been a really good addition to my life, is like being very conscious about my water intake. It's got so many benefits. What are some of the things that you've heard or that you know about water and the impact on the body?
Water, like again, it's the foundation of life, right? So we need it for everything. And the simple hack is having a water bottle where you carry it around with you and you know how much water you've taken in the day. One thing I'd say with that, that there's been sometimes an over stress of drinking a lot of water. And so you can actually get
Mm,
into this hyperhydration state where you're drinking too much water, and you have to wake up and go pee it in the night. So you just want to be mindful of that before you're going to bed. You want to stop drinking about an hour, like you're just sipping on things before you go to bed. That way you can get a full night's sleep and not have to be waking up every little bit. But again, that doesn't work if you're a new mom. But that's ideally that would be it. If you're sweating in the day, you got to make sure you're replenishing your electrolytes. Water doesn't fix that, but you usually get enough salt from the diet.
Andre, this was great. Thank you. We touched upon a whole bunch of really important topics related to the physical health, your nutrition, the role of sleep, and physical activity. And one of the messages I'm taking from this interview is that just being focused on just the very small steps, right? Just starting off small, not being too concerned or too focused on this ideal ending or the ideal goal, but rather just focusing on building that habit. Those are some of the principles that really yeah, believe in myself, and I'm glad you emphasize that as well today.
Yeah. So just to summarize, the key thing in physical activity, I think, is adherence and finding your incentive structure. So why do you want to exercise? And that will help you stick to the discipline. Finding something maybe greater than yourself to motivate you and stick with it, and allowing yourself, like you said, the freedom to fail and fall off the wagon, but making it easy for yourself to get back on the horse.
Great point. Thank you again, Andre. And Andre, if people want to know more about some of your work or perhaps consult with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me online on the all the different social media platforms, especially Instagram and Facebook at Andre Gear.
Andre Gear. Andre, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. Everyone, if you enjoyed this talk and enjoyed some of the information we shared about today, be sure to pick up a copy of my book, The Promise Wheel. You can find it on Amazon. Very simple read, but I go in depth into a lot of the things we discussed here today. Thanks again, everyone, for watching, and take care of yourselves.